Hello, everybody. My name is Lewis Lee, and this is Plan and Traffic. We do this every Thursday night, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you're into cars, boats, trucks, or anything you can put gas in, we talk about it. So please share with your friends, like, and leave comments. And you're welcome to give your input on the chat in Facebook Live or YouTube Live. And we can see it on the side so we can interact. And tonight we are talking retired race cars and their owners. And I got this topic from Brian Nutter. He's going to join us tonight, and we're going to bring up old memories of old cars that we grew up watching race and beat up on the streets. And so, Plan and Traffic. A lot of us here in Plan and Traffic relate to a lot of the racing. Big part of our fan base is racers and stuff like that. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. Waiting on Ray to jump in, and then I'm going to get Brian in and the fellas, and we're going to talk car stuff. Let's see. You want to get Brian in now? Hey, Brian. How you doing?
I am doing wonderful tonight. Thanks for having us on.
Oh, anytime, man. You're family now. I told you once you come on, you're family. You can come on anytime.
It's great. It's been capping a wonderful week.
Good, good. The weather's getting a little chilly here in Ohio, but it's still nice weather though.
I know it's we're pouring concrete. We're trying to expand my garage. I've been trying to get a garage built for I don't know about 3 years, and it was like coming out of COVID, and that was tough.
Yeah.
And then the price of lumber was sky high, and now that's down, but concrete's up, and it's just like I
Yeah,
don't
it's
have any
crazy.
more time.
Yeah,
So
I've been following you on Facebook. It looks good.
it's coming along. Yeah, it's coming along. I could only build like 650 square foot. So instead of going like, width and depth, I just ended up going up
Okay,
vertically.
can't
So
stop you there, right?
oh yeah, it's been a learning experience, and I'm lucky to have so many, friends that, do this stuff. I can kind of count on them and ask for advice.
Great, great.
Yeah. What have you been
So,
up to with your project?
just working on my bus, man. Trying to get the bus done, and my next thing, I'm gonna start working on my Chevy pickup.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pull that behind the bus. So I kind of want to, spruce it up a little bit, you know, make it obnoxious.
That's awesome, man.
How's your son's Porsche? Did you get the motor done?
So let's see where we're at with that. The last thing that we got done with that is we laid the fuel system out on the floor. We mapped out like what the AN fittings look like, and the AN size, and the regulators out of a C5. So we picked up this for the folks that don't know. We picked up this 944 on Facebook for Facebook Marketplace for $2,500 or something. Looks great. It had skipped time on the timing belt, and he was like, Dad, let's get this thing running. He's 21.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, listen, you can get this thing running, and it's still not going to make any power. And if it does run, you're still dealing with something of unknown mileage. 1983 Bosch Electronics. The fun never ends with this. Let's just start fresh. And so we swapped that LS in it. Another $500 score off Facebook was a all aluminum 5.3, and the company he works for does the swap kits.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah. So the motor mounts, the adapter to hook the engine up with a C5 bell housing, clutch, uh, and some of the clutch like hydraulics bolts to the factory torque tube, and then just like a C5 Corvette runs out to the factory transaxle in the back. So not major surgery to get it in. It looks right at home, but we've got an intake for it. We've got um, an ECM. We've got a harness, and just trying to get the fuel to it this time around, and probably have it running in a few weeks.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When you had posted it maybe a month ago, I guess you posted it, and we talked about it here on the show. That I love that body style. That's a nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old. I am old. I'm 52, but I remember those things when they were new, and they look good. They're Radwood. We went to 944 Fest out at the Ledges, Nelson Ledges, the road course here locally to you and I.
Mhm.
And that had a huge turnout, like apparently the biggest turnout that they've ever had.
Wow.
And yeah, it was weird because it was like a little bit of a car show, but many of the cars were there to turn laps. And it wasn't like professional race cars. I mean, some of them were, race cars, like that's just what they do in life, right? IT racers,
Right.
SCCA and stuff. But a lot of them were just cars that people bomb around on the tracks, and they were out there, just doing their thing. And it was good to see it. Van had a great time.
Great, great. Yeah, that's nice because you don't have to spend a lot of money to still go have some fun.
Right.
And locally, that's nice. Yep.
Yeah. So we're gonna see, it's gonna pretty much triple the power. They made 145 horsepower stock, and we've cammed this one up a little bit, did a little bit of head work with it. So it should be making maybe 380 to the wheels or something.
Hmm.
His goal is to try to make it as fast as a Cayman S, a new one.
Mm-hmm.
That costs a lot of dough, but should have a similar power to weight ratio, and we'll just keep working at it until he gets there. So that's the goal, is to try to do that for, I don't know, he's getting close to $10,000 invested now. The car was $2,650. The swap kit, like retail on it, it's like roughly, I don't know, it's like $5, but that's headers, exhaust, like tons of stuff. It's like realistic what things cost. The electronics, all the things that the engine didn't have. It wasn't a junkyard engine exactly. It didn't come dressed with coils and all the little tiny things that add up. So yeah, that's our realistic price, what he's got into it. But he's still on the plus side right now. Like, I could never sell my car for what I got into it, but he's still like, he could actually, at least break even on, where he's at right now.
Yeah, but he's 21. He's gonna have a lot of fun before he gets out of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal with him. And I'm just like, hey, do things right, do things once, and I don't see any reason why he couldn't own this thing the rest of his life, right?
Yeah, they're nice cars. I love that body style. Matter of fact, Eddie Murphy had one. He did an interview a long time ago, and he had that car, and I forget how many speakers he said he had in it. He had like 30 speakers in it or something.
Right.
Yeah. So,
no, it's super solid. It's like the German steel. It's simple, but it's like really solid. Like, the doors, thunk, everything on it is just, it's special. And being from the 80s, it's an 83, which was one of the very early ones. It doesn't even have power steering in that year, and like apparently 84 and 5 is when they got power steering. AC it's been ejected, so it does have power brakes, and that's a little bit of a weird one. So the one thing that you lose when you put the V8 in it, it's got this monster brake booster inside, and you put the V8 in there, and that's got to go. And you could go to manual brakes, but apparently there is the Hydro Boost from a BMW. So it bolts in place, and you essentially run the Porsche 944 power steering pump, and you loop through your power steering rack, through the brake booster, and through a cooler or something. But yeah, we'll figure it out.
well, he has the right guy behind him. I'll tell you that.
I don't know. It's an adventure for both of us. I can help with the engine, and that's what I was telling him. I'm like, son, this is divine intervention here. Your dad develops LS parts. You work for a company that does the LS swap into the 944. Yeah, so he's getting a good deal on it, just because he works his butt off. And he's like, yeah, you're right. So I don't know. He's way more frugal than I was. Like, I ran up credit cards and all sorts of craziness when I was trying to race. And he's got his savings. He's been saving all through high school. Kind of like this old school story, right? Where they're like, I saved up all through high school and I bought my brand new GTO.
Yeah.
That kind of story. I don't know that ever really happened in life, but they say, right?
Yeah.
And in his case, he saves up through high school and has a little bit of money to blow, and he's got his first full-time job. And he's just like, Dad, let's go ahead and get this thing and hop it up. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And then the garage comes along,
Yeah.
and so it's crazy. I always said my racing career would stop when my son started, but yeah, we're in contention. He's turns out he's helping me out with mine, and I'm helping his out, and we're working on his CX500 Honda motorcycle all at the same time too. So he's getting into it.
That's great. That's great. See, my son wasn't into cars or anything, so he was into more sports.
Uh-huh.
But now he's starting to want to learn how to build stuff because I build a lot of stuff here at the house and for the
That's
bus.
right.
So he's getting into it a little bit, but yeah, that's great that you have something in common. That is a big plus.
Well, it's weird. I mean, he's 21 now, but he started. It wasn't until maybe 3 years ago. He started like sending me, like, what do you think of this car? What do you think of this car? This car is cool. And it's like, wow, this is because I've taken him to races his entire life, and but he did it, enjoyed it fine. But in terms of him actively spending his time doing it, kind of a late bloomer, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
There's always hope, but I'm just excited to have something to share with them.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm gonna get the fellas in. Brian, that I'm gonna bring on, he's a Porsche guy.
Okay.
He knows his stuff about Porsches. Bring him on first.
Hey Brian, how you doing?
Hey Brian, what are you up to?
Just living the dream.
Rock and
so
roll.
you said that was an 83 944 or 924?
Yes, it is 944 83 vintage.
Yeah, you want to put 944 turbo axles in the back if you're running that kind of power.
Yeah,
it's the same changeover, and if you can find, it's very difficult now, but if you can find a 944 turbo braking system, you'll have more braking than you'll ever need to stop the car.
It's cool.
And it's very little modification because those cars are all interchangeable. Those parts a lot of them are all interchangeable. It's really too bad that you don't have a 85 and a half.
Yeah.
Newer
suspension.
It has the newer suspension, and it didn't have the antenna. Those cars, the antennas all leaked waters onto the fuel box, and where the fuses are underneath. I spent many times underneath those dashes. So.
Yeah, I don't know what we're getting into with it. Right now with the engine and the harness, it's all kind of, in essence, I mean, it's a factory EC, but it's a standalone. Uh-huh. And then I'm starting to look at connecting things to the car, and I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, there's some really great resources though that the Porsche forums that I found for those cars are excellent. Like they just get the detail of what somebody needs to be able to hook up the tack feeds and oil pressure levels, trying to make the dash work essentially.
Those I mean, like I said, there's a couple of them that I've worked on that had LS swaps in them. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny because this part is standard or American, and then you have the German part, and sometimes they just don't really intertwine. But luckily, if you take a little bit of time, those cars you can make your own you can make your own system.
Okay.
And just write everything down. I mean, when you do it, because I used to prepare a couple cars that guys raced, and it really got to the point where I could keep it all stock.
Yeah.
But it just made it easier going in there and running your own, making your own harness type thing.
Yeah. The thing I'm a little concerned with is going to be brakes. I guess you can upgrade to like Porsche turbo brakes and things, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you can find like a 944 turbo brakes,
Okay.
That the only difference is those the front caliper and rear caliper are the same identical looking caliper, but it's the piston size that's different. Sometimes a lot of guys will put they'll put the rears on the front and the rear and the fronts on the back, and they have all kinds of screwy things going on.
I had the same thing happen on my C5 where, all of a sudden I was locking up the rears and brake pedal travel problems, all sorts of badness.
Yeah.
So,
and you want to think, because when you're looking at the piston cups, but again, that's what it is. But even if you found just the fronts and change that over, it's a lot of braking when you run in the factory. And most of them do the Hydro Boost because of you're limited on the space with that because of the brake booster.
The other thing is I was looking up tire availability, and it's crazy bad. It's got these like when you see the car, it's got the original cookie cutters on it. So as we all remembered what those cars looked like from, when they were cruising around in the 80s, and I love that wheel. And then I go to try to find a decent, 200 treadwear type of tire that we would run in street competition, and nothing really available. It's got radial TAs on it that are from the 90s. The car apparently blew up and got parked for a long time.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, that's the only problem. And a lot of times, like on mine, I had a 84 944, and I had put a 2.7 motor or 2.9 motor. I mean, it was a bigger 4-cylinder, and I switched it all over to turbo injectors and everything, and the fuel rail, and the fuel pump and so forth. And but the crazy part about that is I'd found a set of old school BBS wheels that were wide enough to put some tread on them and do a little bit of flaring out on the body. They have a spacer on the back. There should be a spacer on the back also that you can take off. It's like a 1-inch spacer that changes. You got some wiggle room back there.
So the crazy thing is there was a guy out at the track. I don't remember his name. At Nelson Ledges here this last time around, and he was running, I think it was 295s in the back and like 275s on the front, like no problem. It was some CCWs. And one of the guys that we raced with at Summit Autocross Week had 315s on the back and 285s in the front, and had some Lindsay Racing parts on it. And he came in the top 5 out of all of these cars that we raced with, 600 horsepower plus, dedicated autocross cars. And he and his wife were from Canada. They drove down to the event, did the whole event for 4 or 5 days, driving around PA and Ohio, and then drove it back home. And yeah, great dude. He did a lot of the suspension modifications himself too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and like I said, I had one. Like I cut the spare tire tube out, and that took a lot of weight. It's a goldfish bowl back there.
It is,
and like I said, there's you can do a lot, and those are fun cars. Actually, they're so balanced. That's the best part about those cars. Now I know that you're putting the V8 up there, which kind of throws it a little bit, but again, those things are so balanced that they're really fun to drive.
I'm excited. So we've got apparently it picks up 40 pounds, which if we move the battery to the back, that's helpful. One thing about it is the engine is farther forward, like even the back of the engine, it's not packed back towards the firewall as much as I'd like to see. On my C5, I actually got the radiator relocated to the rear of the car, and that fixes a ton of problems with the weight, being kind of nose heavy on the car. So I don't know that we're going to do that kind of major surgery with his yet, but we're doing everything we can to keep the balance in the car. It's it's going to be sublime when it gets done.
Yeah, because if you take out well, you got to do a little work around the firewall, but you can move that back. You just don't have your air conditioning. You don't have air conditioning now,
Right.
and other than the heater box stuff, there. And again, I don't know where you're really at, but with those type of cars, you're not really worried about heat and AC.
Oh, he's here next to me in the cold.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
on.
We'll be fine. I'll send you some pictures, but my goal is for him to start doing his first autocrosses and things here in the spring. He's not even done an autocross yet, and he's like, he's a little, I think, scared isn't the word, but he typically doesn't know what he doesn't know until he does it, and he's like, oh, that wasn't so terrible.
Mhm.
And even like with Autocross Week, he's like, people weren't taking this as seriously as I thought that they would be taking it. It's like, no, we are here to have a good time.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of levels of racing. You gotta just get started.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But if you can find a set of turbo axles, because they'll bolt right in and you won't have any problem. You won't have any problems. Try to steal the half shafts also part coming out. That's all different metal and
Got
a little
it.
beefier. And every once in a while, I had a brother-in-law that had a one of those newer GTOs that he did all kinds of stuff, and he was twisting up axles left and right. And believe it or not, this is when I was at the dealership. He called me up and said, "Man, I need a set of turbo axles." And I was like, "Well, when did you get a turbo?" And he said, "No, I got to put it in my GTO because that's the only thing that's going to keep them from twisting up."
No kidding.
And sure enough, I had a set, so I had donated them to him. So that I don't have any way of helping you on that, but he put them in, and like I said, I thought that was the craziest thing. But again, it's those parts or those things that you learn from those other guys that tried and so forth. So,
well, there's a lot of cars on Facebook Marketplace, and we need to rescue them. They're cool cars, and it's like whatever it takes to keep these things alive. Repower them, do whatever. But there's not going to be much around left that has pop-up headlights and a manual transmission anymore, right?
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
it's amazing on that.
Hey, Ray, you made it in.
Yeah. 10 minutes ago, I was like dead to the world.
taking that retirement nap.
Well, I had a busy day. Yeah. And then I left my computer on because I did a car inspection today. So I just left the machine on. I come down and says, of course, it wants to reboot or it's going to do it randomly. I'm like, all right, you might as well go and reboot. Now, of course, everything was, now you sit and you wait. So, Brian, it's good to see you again. It's been a while. It's been a minute.
Absolutely. Good seeing you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, give Brian something to talk about tonight early.
Yeah.
Brian doesn't usually talk early.
So
I'm trying to put. I have my '87 Audi Quattro that I'm trying to search the universe for parts and pieces and trying to get that after sitting for the last 20 some years, trying to bring that back to life. And everybody tells me the same thing. Just put an LS in it. That's everybody's answer. But I'm for the punishment, and I'm one of those guys that likes the sound of a 5-cylinder. It's a little unique sound. So
is that 16V or 8V on that year?
It's a 10 valve. It's an old school.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
5 valve. I mean, it's a 5-cylinder, 10 valve, non-turbo. It's not the fastest thing, but it used to piss a lot of people off because they couldn't get rid of me. I was like that little fly that kept coming back in front of you. You kept swatting,
Right.
Once we got into the turns or the corners, I could keep my foot on the floor. And with the Quattro, the all-wheel drive, it just stuck. It climbed buildings, it was just there the whole time. And it really pissed a lot of people off because they couldn't get rid of me, So
Mhm.
Tremendous rally cars. I've got a local friend here in Ohio, owns a company called the Swedish Solution, so does tons of Saab and Audi work. And he's like you. It's like you cannot break the engine, so you just keep adding boost, and as long as you can feel it, you can make the power with them. That's not the problem. So you're in pretty good shape with that engine.
Yeah, like I said, it's a great. I love to. I keep saying if I've got it up and running. It's not 100% at the moment. I had to find some injector cups for it, and that took a little bit of time because nobody on this side of the pond had any, and I had to get them from overseas.
Okay.
And like I said, it's just one of those play with it when you got time, and hopefully it can get back on the road. I'm trying to convert.
Speaking of race cars that get retired, how about a driver that never retires at age 70? It's our buddy Jeff Gerner with his S4 that's done like 240, 60 or something out of Bonneville.
Wow.
And he blew the engine up last year. He's 70, right? Wow. He's raced this car. It is just phenomenal. I think it's the world's fastest sedan to this day. And he blew the engine up. He missed a shift, and he hit something like 15,000 something RPM. It was crazy. 12, 15. What does it matter at that point, right? And he ends up like, I've got to pull the engine out of this car with the turbos and the intercoolers and, every system hanging off the car that's required for land speed racing. And he did it, and it kicked his butt because he's, again, 7 years old in his garage doing this work, but he got it together. And I'm just so proud of him.
That's insane. That's kind of like when you think you're just not going to stop by the Home Depot and pick up some day helpers to help you pull this stuff apart. It's maybe that we need to find of course, it's hard in this market to find a bunch of guys that want to work on a car anymore. I mean, so I watch, there's a guy on YouTube, what was it? Rat Rod Bob or something like that. And he's a good old boy down in Georgia. And he's, up there in age, and watching him shuffle around in the shop, I'm like, man, I hope I can still do that at that age too. So,
well, I'll tell you, Brian, you can. And I just learned this week that, Brian, I'm retired from my regular normal job, and now I'm working more than I did when I was retired, but on fun stuff. And one of it is, I work at a shop. I do repair work. And they had me on this tow truck for the last week, which I keep telling them, not a truck mechanic, damn, that stuff's big and heavy, and I'm not big and heavy. So, but I found out it was kind of funny. Now when I put it together in retrospect, the day they brought the truck over to the shop, I think the owner knew that I would just ignore it and not even go near it because I said I didn't want to work on it.
Right.
So what they did is they had the guy he does polishing in the shop, paint polishing, and hardly speaks. I like literally no English conversations with this guy. He pretty much grunts at me and I point to things. So he went over there and they had him jack up all four corners and put jack stands under this thing and take the wheels off. Now they figured, at least if it was accessible, maybe I'd go look at it. Well, fast forward, I did. And I did the job, took the stuff apart, put it back together, and used my Matco brake tool again, Brian. And the brake flaring tool worked like a charm. My snap-on ratchet's another question that didn't work so well. So
I have no rebuild kits for that.
Yeah, who does?
I don't have rebuild kits.
Oh, I know you don't. Yeah, I'm going to send it back. So now that the job was done, I told the manager in the shop, I said, okay, look, I'm done. And that's it. It's ready to go. So he said, okay, I'll have, the guy's name is Ventura. I'll have him put the wheels on tomorrow. I said, oh, well, that's nice. He goes, oh yeah. We're going to have him do that. He goes, he's young. He's young and, and loves trucks. So we'll let him do it. I was like, oh, so I see. I guess my status kind of raised up because they realized, like, give the old guy a break. Don't make him do the heavy stuff, and maybe he'll do some more, So
what was the deal with it? What all did it need?
It needed rear brakes, and it was a 3500 GMC Wrecker 4-wheel disc.
Uh-huh.
And to do the brakes, you got to take the axles out. Then you have to take the hub and the rotor are together. The studs go through the both of them. You take that assembly off, and that assembly itself has to weigh at least 60, 65 pounds a piece.
Right.
Easy. The calipers have to weigh about 30 pounds a piece. So and everything was rusted solid. So, when I looked at it, I said, oh, no. But, you chip out a little bit at a time and you get it done. And, so everything was heavy, it was just heavy work. And we have a press, but we couldn't use our press to press the studs back in. And each wheel has 10 studs because we couldn't get the geometry right. So we did it the old fashioned way with a couple washers and a big nut. And we used a lug nut, which literally got destroyed in the process. We had to sacrifice one to drive all those 20 studs in. So it was just grueling, hard, heavy, nasty. Then you go, I'm bleeding. I changed the hoses. One of them ended up, it was leaking. Well, actually, the first hose I put on there that one wasn't bad. I changed the hose. We put apparently there were 2 listings for the truck. The second listing, believe it or not, was for a dual wheel wrecker body. I'm like, well, this is a wrecker, so the part should have been right the first time. So that hose ended up leaking where the hose was swaged into the banjo fitting. So I take that one off, and I used one of the old hoses. I put that back on, and it didn't leak. So bleed the brakes, get a good pedal, and the next press of the brakes to the floor. What happens? The hard line blew out.
Yeah.
So, of course, the hard line blows out. They run the lines through the chassis on those trucks. And the leak was just past where the free space was under the truck. It was kind of between where the gas tank and the frame is. So you have just enough room to get your hand in there. You can't see anything, and you certainly can't work in there. So I had to cut the line where I could get at it and pull about 5 feet of brake line out of this thing, exposing an old repair that someone else had done many years ago. And then, again, that's when I used that Matco brake flaring tool, which is phenomenal for close quarters. Made my flare, put a new stick of line in there. I just happened to have one at the shop, and then we were done. We were good. Golden.
Awesome.
Well, that's like one time when the tool truck broke, or I had to do a tire at a shop, and the owner comes out and says, "Oh, Brian, look, you don't need to do it. Let the kid do it," and the kid's in there. He's manhandling and fighting this tire and trying to get it off, and they go in the back and they change it. And of course, I do all this usually at home with spoons, So I mean, it's like, dude, you got a machine and you're still fighting this whole thing, And so of course, it was funny because he came back and he was putting the tire on. And now he's got to, the truck wasn't that high up, but he's got to pick the tire up to put it on to line the stud, all the studs, because and he's over there fighting. I said, son,
Use the bars.
if you're going to do this business, you're young. You got to take care of your body. If you're going to do this, I said, hand me that pry bar. And, he had a 36-inch pry bar, and I rolled the tire up on the pry bar, picked the pry bar, slide the tire on. I said, see how easy that is? And he's like, wow. And I said, you're going to kill yourself. I said, I should have just done it, Us old guys have a few tricks up our sleeves,
I tell you, even when I take tires off of cars in the shop, I raise the car just enough to get those tires off the ground, and then I pull them off.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I mean, getting them off is a lot easier than putting them on, but so you reverse it when you put them back on. I'm not fighting nature anymore. I'm not going to, I'm not lifting this stuff.
So Ray, I thought what you were going to say when you were telling us the story about the young guy is that he was going to start messing the car up so bad that you just had to go in there and take over to keep him from destroying stuff.
No. Luckily, he did the bull work. I wish he would have been there I wish I could have gotten him to take those hubs and rotors off. And of course, they had, when they went back on, the nuts, if you're familiar with that setup, they use these flat nuts to hold the bearings in, and there is a special tool. There's a socket that has a bunch of like windows cut out of it. Well, I didn't have that tool because I'm not a truck mechanic.
Right.
So when we took it apart, it was a matter of a punch and a hammer and all of that. So to put it back together, I was aware of the socket, but I didn't have it at the time. So I had the hub on, and I was trying to start the first nut on the spindle, and I just couldn't get it to catch. It's a very fine thread. So literally, I had to take the hub and rotor back off so that I had a free shot at it, and then I could maneuver it, and I could get the nut to go on. So I said, okay, it is good. The threads aren't damaged. We're good. Put it back together. And that's when we did run up to to an AutoZone, and they had that socket. And you put the nut on the socket, and you just kind of put it on and just kind of turn it once or twice, like you dial in a safe, and it catches, and it just drove it right in. No drama. So, again, having the right tool saved the day.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
And it's a bearing, so you need to tighten it and then back it off, because one of them is a lock tab you have to put into effect. So you need to be able to manipulate those nuts, and with a punch and a hammer just ain't going to do it. So
Right.
It's one of the things I'm trying to teach my son, because he is pretty new to the mechanic side of things, right? And it is painful to watch him. It was painful to watch him. He's gotten so much better in the course of the last year. But I do let him struggle, right? We all have to just let him struggle and get a little bit bloody sometimes. But, I'm like, I just keep telling him, if it's not fun, you're not using the right tool. And many times, I don't know what the right tool is, but I know that there's got to be something that would make this particular job bearable. Because I just think about all the minutes and hours, that he spent. I think he's trying to take a transmission. No, it was a third member out of a Ford 9-inch. And I think he spent something like 30 minutes trying to get this thing off. Didn't have a slide hammer, just decided he just manhandle, couldn't get this thing unstuck. It's like, dude. And, I'm lucky that his bosses there are letting him make these errors. Mm-hmm. And when he started at the place he's starting, we kind of prefaced it with, he's pretty green, but on the plus side, you get he was 20 at the time, you're getting a 20-year-old young man that shows up to work every day and eager to work. Right. And so if you can suffer through this summer of being a green mechanic, he is going to work out well for you in the long run.
Right. Oh, without a doubt. So what type of shop is it that he's working at?
So he works at a company it's a company called G-Force. And I know that there's a safety company called G-Force, and there's a fire suppression. There's a transmission company called G-Force. This place is a place that makes cross members for all sorts of like swap kits. So, we talked about engine swaps a little bit earlier. Just an amazing amount of swap kits. So they do all the fabbing and powder coating and welding and all that stuff to be able to, because these cars, I'm just amazed. Well, I remember how flexible the cars are, but everybody, now that they've had a modern car in their lives, are like, why am I dealing with this car that does this? It doesn't have to be that way.
That's the fun of driving. You literally had to drive that car. We were just talking about that. One of my buddies at the shop, a younger guy.
Yeah.
They dropped off his uncle's Grand National at the shop. We've had it in there before. And he told me how much fun he had taking it up to the corner of the parking lot and doing donuts and hanging the back end out. I said, oh, a little bit of oversteer, huh? I said, that's cool. I said, see, with those cars, I said, you could drive them through the turn. You could power them through the turn. And even though they're getting a little out of shape, you can use that and work with it. You get the car right on that ragged edge. And I had my Fiat with me at the time, and I said to him, now this car understeers. And I said, if you want to know what that means, look at my front tires, because they're scuffed right out to the very edge. I said, look at the rear tires. They're pristine. I said, that's oversteer. The car plows the turn. Right. So you have to drive it totally different. And he goes, oh, yeah. It's a lot of fun. I said, yeah, it sure is.
That's awesome.
So Brian brought up a topic on Facebook, retired race cars and their owners.
Oh, so,
that's why I invited him on tonight to bring up old memories of where are they these days.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, and you know what? Race cars of all ilks and types. I mean, you hear about that stuff getting unearthed. You know, somebody finds one of Glidden's old cars or old stock cars. Plenty of those sitting around in the
Paul
South.
Newman's or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so to me, I graduated in 90, and I know that's probably a few years younger than some of you guys, but like I remember these cars from high school, and and they reached the pinnacle of racing in their particular class or sanctioning body or what it was, and they might have done that for 2 or 3 years, and then family happened or whatever it was. And I think some people do sell their cars, but I think there's a lot of people where we put so much time and effort into the cars that they're not worth it to anybody else, but it is worth it to us.
Yeah.
So we keep them. They go back into a corner of a garage or a shop somewhere, and they just, it's like artwork, kind of just sitting back out in the corner. And I'm like, that thing is still fast. If you put fresh tires on that thing, and if you could drive halfway as good as you used to be able to drive, you could still go out there and do pretty good against, the new field.
The fellow who owns the shop, he likes to buy stuff late at night on eBay and whatever. He's almost as bad as Brian. But a couple of years ago, he bought an old NASCAR, and it was one of Dick Trickle's cars. It was a Monte Carlo. And we have it sitting right behind the shop. I actually worked on this thing, and what they did is they left it totally intact except for the engine and transmission. They pulled that out and put in a center bolt valve cover 350. I tell you, even the motor that they put in there, which was probably out of one of their work trucks, it's a pretty hot little motor. I mean, for a street car,
right.
It's a hot motor, yeah. And I guess the car, as it raced, had a manual transmission. Now there's an automatic in there. So he wanted to take it up. He bought tires. He wanted to go up. We're in New York, so he wanted to go up to might have been Pocono. They'll do like these open track days if you have, if you have a car that's that you want to run. You're not going to actually race. It's just kind of like for fun.
Yeah.
And he couldn't make it up there last year, or this year. So we'll see if maybe next year. But I look out the window every once in a while. I'm like, yep, it's still back there.
A lot of those things make it into land speed racing, which the bodies were tremendously slick.
Sure.
They always have been. And there's nothing. To go 200 doesn't take that much horsepower, right? In the standing mile or whatever it is, but the cars are tremendously safe. The cages, the fire suppression,
right.
The drive line, all the stuff that you'd have to beef up in a street car is already done in those cars. So, you can buy a retired, Cup or Busch or whatever, kind of car they had, and, put any kind of motor into it and go pretty darn quick with them.
I remember the first time I worked on it, I just had to put tires on it. I had to take the old ones off, put the new tire, and I was just looking at the brake system and the suspension and how, I mean, the enormity of the brakes, and then just the way they run the lines and engineer them. It's artwork. It really is artwork. And I remember last time we parked it, I had a brake issue with the car, and I'm thinking, man, what if I need a caliper? Where am I going to get a caliper? I'm going to call Napa, say, look, I need a caliper for Dick Trickle's NASCAR.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we're talking about old race cars or track cars or whatever, I don't know if anybody else follows, but Gnarly Speed Shop, they had gotten a 55 or 56 and that they'd bought, and they're trying to hunt down because it was a track car, because it had sticker, it had track decals on the window, where it ran. And, this is like 30 years later. And Olivia there was asking for anybody that had pictures for this car. She's starting to find people digging through, finding, and to track down the old history like that's really interesting.
And was it a circle track car or drag or what was it?
It was a track car.
Okay.
This is the beast.
Wow, look at that thing.
A quarter
Yeah.
mile car.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty
we were
cool.
putting the tires on it, but that's yeah, it's the real deal. You
You
know?
know,
Yeah.
you get so much car for the money with those things too.
Oh,
There's
without a
a
doubt.
Dodge that I saw in a buddy's shop here a couple of years ago, and like the technology in this car is just phenomenal. He bought it for less than 30 grand,
Oh yeah.
essentially running, and it's like, oh my God, you couldn't build this thing for, four times that. And I know in Cup World, they just, it's not competitive anymore. You got to do something with it. So it just gets
Yeah.
sent off to the B leagues or C leagues or whatever. But it's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah,
amazing to me.
the Craftsman, or well, I don't know what the series is now, but Craftsman Truck Series.
Yeah.
Those trucks, man, you can find those trucks for cheap, and the amount of work and the 10 work in that truck, you're so far ahead with that. It's pretty incredible getting that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be in the right place.
And then you got guys like Dale Jr. that has acres and acres because he buys
Graveyard
all
of
that
old
stuff and
race
sits
cars.
out there, and it's like, holy crap, how can you have
Yeah.
all that stuff sitting around like that?
No, what a museum.
Personally, I could. The wife wouldn't care too much for all the. I call it yard art. I mean, I already have two sitting in the backyard, and I constantly have to move them around to show that they do move or they're gone. So
That's cool. Yeah, it's weird. I just, I guess with my competition and my racing, there are guys that just absolutely live it. And for me, I'm more of like I like to experiment with the car, right? So, I build it, I take it to the track, I see what it does, and I tweak on it. And then once I think it's probably made it as far as it's going to go with it, it comes back home again, it gets torn apart, and it gets reinvented again. And, so I think about the guys that I've raced with in some of the various classes, and I just kind of wonder what happens to those cars. I mean, some of them get really just sold off and parted out, and it's really sad to me to see a great car that has a great history get parted out like it's just nothing. But yeah, I don't know. Some people do take care of them, and to your guys' point, you see these cars. You guys have probably even talked about it before, but these cars that they were special. Like if you were 18 and you graduated in 1958 or something, right? So that 57 Chevy is really special to you. And as you get more money and more money and more money, the cars rise up in value until they're worth a ton of money. And then folks start kind of like,
Aging out.
Yeah, aging out, right? And then the cars start losing life and start going for less and less. And you always hope that somebody would recognize what a Stutes Bearcat is.
Oh, geez, yeah. Oh man.
Right. Yeah. So I just think about those cars, and I see some museum pieces now where I'm like, I wonder if people really knew what that car was, or was it truly special? Many times I don't recognize what was special about it, but it was special to somebody if it made it into that museum.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think of that too. I have a lot of friends. Well, not a lot. I have some good friends that have Model A's. I have my friend and his wife, both of them. He owns a car. She owns a steak truck. And I remember when those cars were kind of top of the heap in restored condition or original condition. And now I've seen pristine examples go for like $8 grand.
Right.
It's like, because people don't know what they are. But I have seen some younger people buying them. Now, I don't know if they know what they're getting into, because I've driven them, and it's a job.
Yeah, it is. I had a
Happen.
What was that?
It's awesome.
a young kid. He was driving to our local college in a Model A. He drove it every day, man. He'd pass me up at work.
Wow.
And he just kept it moving.
Some time ago, 10 years ago, there was a fella that worked at Haggerty. He was in media relations. I had him on the radio show a number of times. I just can't think of his name right now. It used to be on the tip of my tongue. but he did a project called the 365 Days of A. And what he did is he took his Model A, and the idea was to drive it every day for a year
Yeah.
to work, to meetings, to the store. The only time he didn't drive, he would drive it to the airport and leave it in long-term parking if he had to go on a work assignment, and he would fly to his destination and of course have to drive a modern rental car because you can't rent the Model A.
Yeah.
When he came back, he drove the Model A again. And he went through having to have the engine rebabbited at some point on the road, drove it in the winter, and said it was surprisingly not a bad car to drive in the winter because the real skinny tires would cut through the snow and ice. Yeah. And he said the flat windows didn't collect any snow or ice. It just sheeted off. There's no sloped surfaces on that car. Of course, the heat isn't modern and, all the other things, but he ended the trip at, I think it was out here on the East Coast. I think it was at Hershey, not Hershey or at Carlisle. They had a big event.
Probably Hershey.
Yeah, they had a big event with the Model A's, and his car. That was like where he culminated his trip. So that was a great project, and we kept up with him, and we followed him through that journey, and it was phenomenal.
That's awesome for him to do that.
Yeah.
So you
I mean,
bring up a great
face
point.
on money.
So anytime my wife tries to discourage me from buying a car because it just doesn't make sense, right? It's like, hon, they drove these cars back in 1968 every day.
Yeah.
Every family member drove these, aunts, uncles, wives. It wasn't a thing for people to drive around a new 1968 car in 1968 with rear wheel drive and this engine and those tires and those brakes.
Yeah. I mean,
what happened to it?
nowhere near as spectacular as that. I had to do a car inspection today on I do pre-purchase inspections for a company. So I drove my 65 GTO, which is I recently restored, and parked it across the street from the guy's side. He came out and he turned and looked and, whoa, he goes, "Is that yours?" I said, "Yeah, the Kia." I said, "I just got that Kia, man. I love that car." And he's like, no, the Pontiac. I'm like, "Yeah, man." Yeah, that's mine. He says, "Wow, you drive that car?" I said, "You know what? Yeah, I do drive it. It's meant to be driven. I don't drive it every day, but I drive it a lot." I said, "Today was a beautiful day, and coming to look at your Camaro, I figured I would take my Pontiac." And he came, he goes, let's go look at your car." So the inspection took a lot longer because we were just BSing about
Talking car stuff.
Yeah. So it's just the universal language.
Really is.
I love it.
See, I definitely feel that the muscle car era will last for a longer time than that Model T era because, the Model T, let's face it, I don't see the allure of the car. And I know people from different generations will be like, I don't see the allure of a 69 Camaro, but that's BS.
Right.
You can look at a 69 Camaro, you can look at a 69 Mustang, and you can see the beauty in that car where a bucket, I'm just like, I'll pass. And the companies aren't remaking buckets.
No.
They were making a 69 Camaro or 68 Camaro. They're still producing the Mustang to kind of look like the Mustang and the Charger and all that. So that whole next generation, they're going to know that, hey, that's the original,
Yeah.
So I think the muscle cars will still hold their value years from now.
To that point, Terry, that's a very good point. Again, it was years ago when I was doing my Father's Day car show, and we had this group called the they did a little they built muscle trucks. They built hot trucks. Exceeding Limits Truck Club was the name of their club, and we had them on the show, and they were all younger guys. I think the oldest guy in the club at the time was like 38, and everybody else was, a lot of guys were in their 20s, and maybe some even a little younger. And my partner, my co-host, asked him, "Hey, how come you guys build these trucks?" And they're doing body drops and chassis drops to the point of dropping that truck on the ground. They have to window out the hood because when the truck goes down, the engine comes out the hood with the body and chassis drop. And they said, why don't you guys build cars and build the stuff that everybody knows? What are you doing with these trucks that really have no value? And they said, you guys have all the classic cars, and you're not letting them go. Because you're not letting them go cheap. He says, this is what we can afford, so this is what we build. And of course, they're LS and everything. and the light bulb went off in my head, and I said, "Boy, that's how I started. I couldn't buy the car I wanted. I had to buy the car that I could afford
Right.
and make it work." I said, "So they just reinvent. The circle just came fully around again."
Yep.
And I give those guys a lot of credit for that. You know.
Yeah,
Well,
so the body
unfortunately, on
truck.
that also is you're going to have the generation that thinks that the Citation is a car.
Well, yeah.
You know, I mean,
No,
that was their first car. You know,
Right.
or
Right.
you know, so unfortunately, I mean, the love affair for a car. That's why I had to kind of go against you on Terry, because I Google and Google over Model Ts and Model A's. I mean, the technology I know is as barbaric as it is, but for me, I can dig every bit of it. We have one guy here. He's a younger guy, and he's got a Model A sedan thing that he drives you see it at the grocery store, and it's the weirdest thing when people come out and look over and see this thing sitting in the parking lot, because they're like, you know, what's the dealio with that? And like I said, he drives it everywhere.
Right.
You know, I still think the passion will still be there. It just might not be what we think hot rods are.
You know, Brian, we get asked that question quite a lot. You know, what should I build? What can I buy? I can't afford, you know, the top level muscle cars, and guys get dejected and they're ready to just go and do something else, buy a new set of golf clubs. And I'll tell them, you know what did you drive in high school? What was your first car? Because it usually was a piece of crap, or it was a 4-door or something, you know, it wasn't a real nice car. And I'll tell them, go find one of those. I said, you already have a connection to it because it was your first car, you had it in high school.
Yeah.
I said, you probably get it a lot cheaper than the top level cars. I said, and now when you're driving it and tinkering with it, you're getting involved, your hands are in there, you're using your mechanical skills, you're remember what you forgot, going to learn new things. I said, and every time you drive that car, I guarantee you're gonna go back to those days, and it's going to be a time machine. So this guy asked me today with this Camaro, he asked me how long I had my car. I said, I bought it in 1975. It was a 10-year-old car. I said, I was in high school when I bought it. And he said, wow, you've had it that long? I said, yeah. He said, now I haven't driven it all the time. There was a number of years it was laid up because it needed to be restored. I said, but now when I get back, every time I get in it, I smile. It's like my hair grows long. This fog hat in the 8-track. It's like I look at those fenders, the same fenders that I looked at, 45 years ago, and it just takes you right back. So I know that when you get in that 4-door Nova or a or maybe a Buick or whatever it is, you're going to do the same thing. Sure, it's not a muscle car, but you know what? Maybe that could propel you to the next step. And maybe you meet guys like Terry. Maybe you pry one of his cars away from him because he's got too many.
I got too many.
I worked with the guys at Detroit Speed for a hot minute after my 15 years with Weisco Piston, and I worked with Kyle and Stacy Tucker over there in Mooresville. A very cool company, and we had lots of customers call us. And I guess it was 2015, so it was LS swap. I mean, customers constantly calling up. Yeah, I got a 69 Camaro and it's got an LS with a 6-speed in it. Really? You don't say. Next phone call. I got a 69 Camaro with an LS and a 6-speed in it. No kidding. How can I help you? And there were two very memorable customers. One of them says, "Yeah, I got a 69 Camaro and it's got a 355 with a 4-speed." And it's like,
nice.
Whoa, what do you got?
Yeah.
It's not a 383. No, I just said 355. It's like, all right, this guy just won the Cool Award. And another guy was a soccer player in Europe, and all of his soccer playing buddies all had, and he had them too, the Porsches and the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis and all this business. He had all that stuff already. And he bought an entire, Camaro, essentially out of the Detroit Speed catalog. And then one of the resto companies was pretty close over there as well that had all the stuff. And he's like, well, I need to get an engine for it. And I was so tired of LSs at the point. I'm like, you know what? You need a big block because nobody has heard 582 cubic inches of sound bellowing out of a car in Europe, right? And like a 427 or something, that's small. What you need is a 582. So we proceeded to get him a 582 and whatever transmission could hold up to it. And that is what the guys out there on the Autobahn, doing his thing with. Just that bellowing V8 American sound.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's
It's a
cool.
different sound. Monster.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
With the right gearing and fuel injection, he'll run just as good as an LS, I think.
Well, yeah, there's contention about that. Like I said, I recently converted my car to fuel injection. I did it last year, and even though it's not tuned 100% correct yet, it's a hell of a lot better than it was with carburetors, and hell of a lot of fun too. So, and like this guy today was gaga. He goes, "Wow!" He goes, "So cold starts and hot starts." I'm like, "Yeah, keep going, keep going." I said, "Instant transition, no bogging, no nothing." I said, it's all there. It's just like a modern car. It really is.
What injection did you end up going with?
I have 2 Holley snipers on my car.
All right.
Only because I had dual quads on it already, and I happened to find a friend knew a guy who had 2 snipers on a tunnel ram on a 55 Chevy. I unraveled this story as it went. He put them on, did the install himself because he's he's an old school guy. Drove it 50. The story goes, drove it 50 miles, didn't like it, took them off.
Wow.
Okay. Then went and got a single sniper. Meaning she had to change that intake, put a single sniper on it, drove it for a little while, didn't like it, took it off. I said, "So what's the car got on it now?" He goes, "Tunnel ram with 700 Hollies on it again." I'm like, "Okay, that figures. That's probably right where he should be." I said, "Where'd all the snipers go?"
Right.
So my buddy says, "Well, I bought one for myself in case I ever want to use it," which he won't. I said, "But where'd the dual quad snipers go?" He goes, "Oh, he probably still has them." I said, "We'll see if he wants to sell them." And he did. So I did. And he gave me his harnesses and everything. He gave me the whole 9 yards that he had in the car.
Yeah.
And, you're probably familiar with the back page of the Sniper catalog is dedicated to a bunch of color photos of showing you what not to do with your connections electrically. I think he had every single one of them covered. Every single one of them. Plus, through a little interrogation, I found out not only did he do that, but he probably didn't go right to the battery for his power source.
That's right.
No. Everybody's blaming, the snipers and EMF. Yeah, you know what? I found out you need to go to the battery because the battery, it actually acts as a capacitor and it filters the source. Plus, he just did everything wrong. So his loss was my gain. That's how I got them. And I put them on. I did the install myself, followed the directions because I do read. That's the one thing, I'll actually read. And car fired right up and runs great. I mean, in the beginning, the first 50 miles, first 100 miles were a little rocky. The car had some stalling issues, but that went away. He only went 50 miles. That's,
The interesting thing about that is I was a victim of the first Holley projection system, like circa 1991, right? This was Alpha N.
Right.
And nobody could make them run. And that's pretty true through most injection all the way through the, even through the 2000s. But I think about it now, it's like, did I ever have the distributor timing curve correct? Because you can't make a carburetor run right if you don't have the timing curve correct.
Correct.
And you can't make fuel injection run right if the ignition curve isn't correct. So there's so many things that, unless you probably grew up with carburetors and understood what the engine was asking for, you would probably figure out injection, where a guy that just buys it that never had experience with carburetors, he doesn't know what a lean cough sounds like, or that guy that says, "Oh, it's getting too much fuel" when it has that lean cough. It's like, no, it's not getting enough, but because you grew up around carbs, you just know this stuff.
Well, and I was very fortunate at the time to find out that Holley had their Hyperspark distributor. And I said, "Well, send me one of those." I said, you kidding me? I can tie my distributor to the fuel injection. Like, yes, I want that. You
Yeah.
know, so another $350, well spent, well spent. And they make the installation so bulletproof. You got to be a knucklehead to not be able to do that one. And
That's like you said, Brian. And I see this all day long when I'm walking through the shops and the guys are digging and they're scratching their head and you know, look, and they say, "Oh, it's because of that black box, you know, that mysterious box that does everything." And I keep telling them, you still need these basic steps to make the car run.
Right.
You know, that's how you look at it. And like you said, it's just really funny. You know, like I said, when I grew up into this, working on carburetors and going in, at first everybody was freaked out because, oh my God, there's not a carburetor, it's this injection stuff, and you know. But when you realize you still needed the same exact things for the car to work that way, it made it, you know, it was simple to figure out. And of course, now these guys have no idea about, like you said, the concept of that system, just like a distributor or whatever. You know, they just say, "Oh, it's that black box. Oh my God, it's, you know,
well,
scary to look at."
It's easy to blame the black box because you don't know what's in there. It's a mystical thing. And I mean, it all walks. The black box is always the culprit. But
It's that voodoo stuff. Stay away.
yeah, but you know that
Magic 8-ball.
they see that's the thing. You know, when I had my buddy Joe as a co-host on the radio show, Joe's older than I am, but he had an inordinate way of taking a digital something that was digital technology, and he would explain it to you in an analog version. And the older guys, he used to do training, and that's how he would get to those guys, because he'd speak to them in the language they understand.
Yeah.
He just was able to meld those two languages, if you will, and it was a gift. It really is a gift to do that. Not very many people at all can do that. I mean, he taught me a lot of stuff because, you know, just by talking to him and hearing the way he would explain it, I was like, yeah, you're right. And then it was funny because then our conversations grew where I would talk to him the same way, and I'd explain things. I started using his vernacular to explain things. He goes, sounds familiar.
Yeah. It's like the locomotive mechanic, right? It's like the last guy that knew how to fix the locomotive. And he gets paid all this money, and he bangs around in a few places and makes all this money it's just like one little tap, right? And he figures it out now to make the locomotive run. And I think a lot of us are kind of in that zone where not a lot of people remember how to tune a Sucarb or something like that, right? And then the poor people that buy these things these days, and you know, try to find somebody that knows how to, you know, work an old Weber or something like that. It's
Right.
I don't know. It's kind of scary.
Right. No, very true. Yeah.
Got to go
Very
to the
true.
specialist. Got to go to the specialist. You can't bring it to GM. They pop the hood and be like, "What is this?"
Yeah. Well, you know, and kind of, I open my mouth too much sometimes. I do this inspection. The guy, I'm looking at the car. It's a 327. I said, well, I got a Quadrajet on there. I said, okay, a lot of these cars weren't, it was probably a 2-barrel originally. But he says, wow, you know what kind of carburetor that is? I was like, yeah, listen. I said, you know, I've been rebuilding these things since I'm like 14.
Right.
Really? You rebuild carburetors? I said, yeah. He goes, do you still do it? I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Not as much anymore. And he said, wow. He says, you know, there's this one guy that we use who's out, you know, in Suffolk, and, you know, he's kind of spotty sometimes. He goes, I'm going to keep your number. Can I call you if I need a carburetor? I was like, yeah, okay. I said, I guess.
I didn't like it when I was 20.
Well, you know, that's the thing. I still do enjoy doing them.
Right.
And I explained to him how, you know, I evolved where I used to use the carburetor acid in the agitator, and now I've gone on to use an ultrasonic.
Yeah.
It actually is a much better way of doing it. I throw everything in that ultrasonic. So,
do you think, I'll ask you this question because I think that there's more of an understanding now from the people that buy something from the 60s, maybe that they're buying something where they never experienced a car from the 1960s new. Like maybe they're far younger, but they buy a car from the 60s. And it seems to be easier to tell them that the car is temperamental. It does things in the winter that's different than the summer. This is how they were in the 1960s. They are not going to ever start and run like your 2014, whatever it is. There just needs to
BMW,
be an
yeah.
understanding.
Without a doubt. In fact, my friend, guy that owns a shop, his son actually is running a business now, and he's just a hair under 30 years old. And he grew up with his dad, so he grew up with cars and stuff. And he's pretty good with a wrench. And he has a 70 GTO, and he has a 78 El Camino that's carbureted. But you can tell he gravitates back to the fuel injected cars because that's what he grew up with.
Yeah.
And he'll watch me. He was watching me work on a 66 Chevy, 256 cylinder, and I was tuning it up, and I had to adjust the points. So on that distributor, of course, you have to take the cap off, make your adjustment, put it back on, and check the dwell. So, he saw that the dwell changed. I explained to him what dwell was, first of all, and then he goes, "What?" He goes, I don't get it. He goes, "How do you know to do that?" And I said, "Because I grew up doing it." I said, "If you wanted to tune your car up, this is how you had to do it. And you had to learn what dwell was, what timing did, and then how to affect the change and what it did. And what happened if you went too far each way." I said, "You just kind of learned that." I said to him, "This is the analog model of the module that's in a GM and an HEI distributor. It's all it is. That's an electronic set of points is all it is." I said, "This is the analog version." I said, "So here we're going backwards." And I could see it already. He was like, "Wow, that's a lot of work." I said, "Yeah. And you know what? I used to have to do this every couple months in the car to make sure that it was still running right because the points would wear. Maybe you get a set of points that wasn't as robust as the last ones you had, and the rubbing block would wear down. Points would close, dwell would increase." I said, "You had to go back in and adjust it." I said, "This was like you had to live with this car. It was you really had to be." And then you had drum brakes, so you had to adjust those. So you had good pull on the. I said everything, and I thought back to my friend's Model A when I drove it, and he explained to me this car has 4-wheel mechanical brakes, not juice, but mechanical. He says, "I have them adjusted as close to perfect as I can get them." He said, "But you see that stop sign down there?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you should start hitting the brakes now because you don't have the stop ability that you have with a hydraulic system." And again, it was just when you see the linear, the progression of things. We're lucky to have lived far long enough to see everything from the Model A's right now to modern cars. He hasn't. And I don't fault guys for that because obviously it's when they were born,
Yeah.
I said to him, you missed out on a lot of this cool car stuff. You missed out on the best music too, really.
Yeah.
Because he did.
Hey, I
Very
want to jump in
surprising.
real quick. Papa Squirrel, we've been worried about you. Everything good?
Yes, we have.
He's muted.
You gotta
There
you go.
Sorry,
There was
Pop Squirrel.
about 2 months that I couldn't walk 10 feet without falling down on my face.
Wow.
And couldn't even stand up for more than 15 or 20 minutes. And nobody could figure out what was going on. I mean, I couldn't even drive. My wife says, "You ain't driving." But
Did you
she's doing
change
it
your
'cause I
weed
don't-
dealer?
Huh?
No,
No,
stop.
what it was is one of the doctors had prescribed a cholesterol medication for me. They'd never heard of these side effects. And I went into the office and I'm standing there talking to him, and all of a sudden I just black out. And
Wow.
the only comment was, "Son of a bitch." Yes,
Wow.
it is. I got scratches on the back of my head and arms and that from that. So my wife and daughter did a bunch of research, and they found out that this one diabetes medication that they gave me could cause problems. Well, it did. They took me off of it, and I came back to normal. I can't walk as well as I did, but
Yeah.
and I'm not passing out.
Papa Squirrel, a similar thing happened to me back in what was it, 05. I was taking a medication for my low back, and it was a well-known medication. Little did I know it was building up in my system slowly until I finally got itchy and then jaundiced and was yellow as could be. And getting worse every day. For months, they didn't know what the hell was wrong with me, and it was killing my liver. My liver had flipped. My system had flipped, and it was just some of those weirdo side effects that no one ever saw coming. And when you get hit with something like that, it's
Well,
Wow.
that's what my doctor said about my side effects. They'd never even heard of them.
right.
And I said, well, guess what?
Yeah.
I got them. And
Yeah.
he wouldn't do anything. But my wife and daughter said, let's just take you off this medication because we read a bunch about it. And let's see if anything improves. They took me off a week of that, and I quit passing out at random moments and
Yeah.
falling down and all that. And I still haven't gone back on it. So I'm
No,
waiting.
and you probably shouldn't.
I know we're going to find something else, but I tell you
Yeah.
what, it's damn discouraging when you can't drive because you don't know from one moment to the next whether you're going to be there or not.
Yeah.
And my wife has been gone now for about 5 months. She went overseas for a trip and then came back and that. And she said it was amazing talking to me now. I'm here.
Yeah.
She said talking to me earlier, it was just like talking to a doll. It didn't. I don't know.
I was gonna say when you say you can't drive that way because you're not there. I'm like, that's like 98% of the people that are on the road these days.
Yeah, you fit right in, Papa Squirrel.
Yeah,
Don't
you
worry,
can-
man.
just
Just keep
fit-
going.
Yeah, just come to one coast. You're on one coast. Yo, come out
I
here. you'll be
didn't want
fine.
to kill anybody. Because,
Those
when
cars
you
are
go-
too safe now. Don't worry about it. They just-
Yeah, but you have to replace them, and your insurance company gets a little upset when you wreck about 3 in a row.
That's
yeah.
true.
No,
Well, glad to see you're up and moving.
oh
Yeah.
God, yes. But she did cancel the trip to SEMA this year. Damn it.
Uh-oh.
Oh man.
Well, what it was is she didn't know that I was taking me off this shit would bring me back to normal,
Yeah.
and she couldn't handle me passing out about every 10 minutes at random. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, which meant she'd have had to been wheelchair, pushing me all over SEMA and that.
Well, we could have done like a weekend from Bernie's. Just put a pair of sunglasses on you and push you around.
Yeah, we got you
She
covered,
would
Papa
do
Squirrel.
that.
Did it make you amnesiac when you pass out and come to, like you forgot stuff?
Oh
or-
yeah, I'd sit there and look at things, and my wife would tell me something, and I'd be, huh? Oh yeah, it was so bad. It
Well, if you went to SEMA, you could stay at the same car all day and you wouldn't know.
Like, oh, this is a nice car.
Getting nice
I
about
could
it.
have, but she didn't want to be responsible for me, and she didn't
Yeah.
find this out soon enough. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad.
she was in a big wreck over in Mongolia, and her and her friend were hospitalized for a while.
Yeah, I've seen
they
that.
came-
I sent messages to you guys. I was worried, man. I was like, "Where's Papa Squirrel?" And Debbie's
Papa
jumping hills.
Squirrel has not been answering messages, reading messages, hadn't even hardly been on the computer.
Yeah,
That's how bad I got.
Mm.
yeah.
But
I
we
seen
think we
Debbie
got it
doing
all figured
stunt
out.
tricks and stuff. I was like, "Man, what's going on?"
Don't know, and I don't want to know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys are safe.
Yes, sir. This is the first time I've been on this show now for over 2 months.
Yeah, yeah. I was saying it a couple weeks ago. I was like, "Hey, anybody heard Papa Squirrel? You got to check on him." We was ready to head out to Cali, see where you was at.
Nah, hell, I haven't been in California now for 3 months. I'm up in Washington State at my daughter's house
Are you? Okay.
because she wanted to make sure that if I fell down or had any problems, somebody could watch me.
That's a
Okay.
good idea.
Yeah. So
Okay.
one of these days, in about another month or so, I'll get back to my own house. I told my wife, you ain't leaving again because
Right.
You didn't.
You
You,
know.
didn't leave a pot of beans cooking on the stove or anything, did you?
no, but I'm sure going to do something when I get back.
Ah, good.
There you go.
No.
All right. We keep an eye on you.
All right. Well, we're going to let you guys get back to what you're talking to because I'm sitting here enjoying every minute of them. Even though I'll never own a Porsche in my life, but I won't say that.
Well, you're close with the Carmageddon.
I saw a nice Kia on the road today. In fact, a nice convertible.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I gotta go and put this little boy to bed.
All right,
All right.
Terry. Pleasure seeing
Very
you.
good seeing you, man.
Always a pleasure. I got Brian in the house. You know, how you doing, brother? Got Coach
Doing great.
Isaac over there. Hey, Ray.
Yo.
Quick question. Did you get that engine?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we went up there and hooked up with Tom. And quick story, as I'm looking at his Charger pickup truck and his GTO. Well, I was looking at the bottom of it. It was on the lift, and and now I'm talking to him for a while, and he's a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Hey, Tom," I said, "what did you do for a living before you retired?" And I fully expected him to say he was a body man or a mechanic or something, or an engineer. And he says, he kind of put his head down. He says, "No, I had a desk job. I worked at IBM for 25 years." And Mike was lashing down the engine in his pickup truck. He heard that and he picked up his ears picked up, and he turned. He says, "Hey, IBM, you know a guy named Ron?" And he goes, and Tom says, "You mean Ron Zoney?" He goes, "My best friend. I worked next to him, for 25 years. I love the guy." So Mike says, "Well, I just opened up a new business up in the Catskills." He says, "I know his brother very well. I just hired Ron to be my manager up there." So I was like,
Small world.
I
Wow.
stepped back. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "Mike," I said, "you don't need me in this deal anymore." I said, "You're closer to him than I am." So now he's visiting him at the shop. They're taking pictures with each other. And it's like,
That's great.
That's why
Yeah.
I eliminated myself out of there. I was like, this guy got an engine. This guy's Ray. This guy is Tom.
Yeah.
And both you guys are really good guys. So I was just like, okay.
thank you. Tom is a fantastic guy. Yeah, I appreciate that hookup. That was very nice. And we got to get up, get up to the Mid Hudson, which I love it up there. I love that area. Went to the Daily Planet for lunch. And how far are you from there, though? Like, what's if I wanted to go to you from there, what's the
Tom's about 45 minutes from me.
north? Okay, yeah.
So you took the Taconic, right?
We did take the Taconic, yeah.
So once you get to, I guess, you took the Taconic. So you actually, no, what you had to do is you had to go across. Which bridge did you go across? Did you go across you didn't go across the George Washington.
No, probably
You went up 95 to the Taconic?
Throgs next to the Hutch, and then cross county. Right.
Right, exactly. Okay, so then you took the Taconic. So once you get past,
To the Sprain,
I'm going to say like,
Yorktown Heights.
yeah, somewhere around there. Well, no, actually, Ossining area,
Okay.
I'm across the water, directly across the water.
Oh, okay.
Not even that far. I think if you go past Ossining, you went a little too far.
Okay.
Like if you go to that Tarrytown area, I'm just right across the water.
Okay. Okay.
So, but
Yeah,
no, I'm glad you got that engine because, like I said, I was
Yeah.
thinking about it. I was like, because you asked me, tell you a story real quick, fellas. He wanted the engine out of my Le Mans, and I'd already got rid of it. And I happened to have a buddy who has a beautiful 68 GTO
Yeah.
that he restored, and he wanted to give me his engine. I was like, nah, I don't want that paperweight. It's all about LSs. I'm not gonna put that in, And so it was just sitting in his garage because he put an LS in his 68. So he had a 400?
No, he kept the 400. He used the Pontiac 400 in his 68, not an LS.
Oh, that's right, because he
That's
wants to do an LS. He wants to
Right.
do an LS in that thing. And I said, when you're ready, let me know.
Right.
So I guess it was a 350 worked, right? A Pontiac 350 worked.
Yeah, to 350. Yeah.
Yeah. So I happen to, like I said, I have a buddy who has one. Come get this thing, and he gave it to him.
Yeah. He said it was on a rolling dolly
Mhm.
since 06. And he said, every year I turn it over. I'm like, wow, I don't do that to my motors. He goes, I turned it over every year. He goes, it's inside. The motor's pristine, beautiful.
You can see how meticulous he is.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And even at he had to go and do a job. He does house inspection. So he told me, he says, I got to be out of here by like 11:30, 12. So he goes, otherwise I'll be back after 4. I said, well, we're not going to be playing in your area after 4 o'clock with the bridge traffic and all. Forget that.
Yeah.
I said, we may be kind of tight because we don't even want to leave till 9 or 10 for the bridge traffic. New York, that's how you drive in New York. You go by bridge traffic.
Bridge traffic.
You got to go in and out of the city. So we got there with a half hour of free time. So we get to hang out with him for a half hour. He goes, oh, I'm glad you guys were here. So I said to him, I asked him if he had an engine hoist or anything. He says, I do have a hoist. He says, I'll leave it outside. He goes, I'll put the engine outside, leave the hoist outside. I'll leave you some tools. Do whatever you got to do. Super nice guy. I said, wow, that's going above and beyond, and luckily we saw him, so we were able to connect. And yeah, great story, great stuff. So yeah, thanks again, Terry. You came through again.
I got to say, sorry to be like anti-LS tonight because it seems like half of what I've developed in the course of my lifetime, but I love bringing these older engines back and trying to make them go fast.
Yeah.
It's just so cool to see these engines in these cars. Trying to give them kind of a new lease on life. We've got this problem with flat tappet cams, right? Can't buy good lifters, can't buy good oil, whatever it is, people taking out lifters left and right. So
is that still going on, Brian? Because now the last couple motors I did were flat tappet, and I started them fine. Broke them in, and they're running fine. My own car included, without just using high zinc oil, of course, after the break-in.
Yeah,
no issues at all anymore.
It's really hit and miss, and even guys that understand break-in and understand spring pressures are still having problems. And it really looks like the lifters are just misground. In some cases, and these are American-made lifters, and a lot of them too, which is kind of sad. And it seems like they're like almost like grinding debris into the face of the thing. So it's not like even like cleanly ground. And good luck trying to identify that when you look at the bottom of a lifter. But we're actually trying to come out with more hydraulic rollers, like low lift hydraulic rollers, just to have something to put in these older engines that lives. Not even just for the performance gains so much. I mean, although there is that too, but, even with the guy with the original Pontiac 400 heads or 350 heads or, any of these older engines, trying to come up with a hydraulic roller package that doesn't scare the guy into being like, oh, that's too much lift. That's too much that. I'm going to break this and that. It's like, no, these are really meant as a substitute because you just can't buy, cams and lifters that live anymore.
Yeah. I do love the new cam technology. Well, it's not new anymore, but the the dual pattern cams. I think that I have one in my own car, and I think it's phenomenal. Very nice. Fast ramp. And the car just idles great. And runs good and just performs stellar. I think a lot better than the. That was, I think, one of the bigger booms to happen in the last. I don't know how many years. It's probably longer than I think they've been out. I was gonna say 10 years. I don't know. But yeah.
I mean, you can make some good power with these things. And, I just see these cars at car shows or whatever. And when they pop the hood, and if I see a Ford and a Ford, I see a Pontiac and a Pontiac, a Mopar and a Mopar, it's just like, okay, that's the extra major of cool.
Right.
And I think, going back to the racing bit, you remember when Sport Compact got started, and it was import racing before it was Sport Compact. And before that, it was Hondas racing Hondas. And they all ran mid-15s, and they didn't care if they were getting their asses kicked by a Ford Mustang or something. They were just racing Hondas against Hondas. They just didn't care, right?
Right.
And they had their thing. And then I see some of the racing going on now with factory stock racing, these cars that look like stock with, wide ovals on them, running 9s on bias price. And I'm just like, oh my God, that is so cool. And I know the effort that they must have into traction control and timing and the suspension and all the craziness to make that car that looks factory stock go that fast. But that is cool to me.
Along that lines, I was again talking about my own car because that's what I know the best. With this last rebuild, I was able to buy parts for that motor that back in the day I would have had to have a NASCAR connection.
Right.
And I'm talking about short skirt, hypereutectic pistons, H-beam rods that like you would have had to know Ed Pink back in the day to get rods like this.
Right.
It didn't exist for a Pontiac. I mean, the Ram Air 3 stuff was like the
right.
Again, and I even stuck with the cast heads because I like these heads. I like the valve size, and then the dual pattern cam. And as soon as I got this car running, I said, "Wow, this thing it feels more like a small block now than a big block because it'll rev. It revs freely, and it just the whole complexion of the engine changed with just changing those parts. And I was so happy because I said, I mean, there's nothing like a big old, I just did a job on a 455, an Olds engine,
Yeah.
and that's a big lumbering V8, and that thing runs great. It's a torque monster. But I felt that difference in my own car and said, now this engine deserves a suspension to match it, a transmission to match it.
Right.
So it got tubular everything, QA1s, all the stuff Terry's doing, a 5-speed. And I said, let's go out and carve some corners now because, now we're making right hand 90-degree turns off the on and off ramps. So amazing, just because of the aftermarket. And I was very happy.
To your point, it's very, very. I see the parts being sold for these various engine platforms, right? I see them ranked, from here to there, and it's what's interesting to me is the number of Pontiac 350s or Buick 350s or Olds 350s that we're still selling a ton of parts for versus 455s or 400s as an example. And I guess it may just be because those other bigger engines, they were sought after, they were built, they were blown up, and now they're impossible to find. But, at this point, nobody needs to go 12s in their Cutlass
down to
anymore.
money.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing was, I mean, back in the day, guys would pull 455s out of. I mean, it could have been a grand, the big cars. It could have been didn't have to be out of a GTO.
Catalina or Bonneville.
It could have been out of a Bonneville, or I'm trying to think of the other big, couple of big, or even like with the Olds and the Buick, it could have been out of an Electra. It could have been out of a Centurion, a Buick Centurion. Didn't have to be out of the premier cars. They still had 500 foot-pounds of torque.
Right.
Some of them had 2 barrels on them, but they got changed. And even though they were plentiful out of all the different bigger cars, the 350s were even more plentiful, and no one even paid attention to them.
Right.
And I'm happy to see that a couple of years ago, they actually, I don't know who came out with it, but one of the companies came out with a stroker kit for the Pontiac 350.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to see. I was very happy. I'd like to build one. I really would. I think I'd take Tom's engine and stroke it, but we're putting it in a 72 Le Mans convertible. So I think he's going to opt to keep it kind of stock, but
Yeah.
I'd love to build a stroker.
I got to say that I think Edelbrock did a great job. I mean, there was Indy, that did the Mopar cylinder heads. But if I think about a company that really brought out aluminum cylinder heads for all the older platforms, the AMCs, Pontiacs, Buicks, a lot of engines that nobody had ever created aluminum heads for these things.
Right.
And they're like, you know what, we're going to do it. And it gave those owners a reason to pull apart that engine that he hadn't touched in 15 years because it was as good as it was ever going to be.
Yeah.
And bolts another set of cylinder heads to it, picks up 60 horsepower, whatever it is. And now it's cool again. The guy's enjoying his car.
Right. Things like that. They're milestones in the industry that really give another kick in the butt to the old technology and get everybody moving in a new direction. And
Yes,
I think it's great.
The only thing that scares me about that, especially in the times that we live in now, the problem is they say, well, we're not selling this stuff anymore, so they stop making the stuff.
Right.
And there'll be that one guy like me that's been sitting around waiting for that moment to pull something out and do, and then you can't find, unless you want to be like that Terry guy and put an LS and everything.
Everything.
Well, it's worse. You could be me waiting for that high performance brake kit for your Fiat to come down in price, and it doesn't budge.
It's
that was the funny part. Like for the my Quattro for the Audi, this was a couple of years back, and I stumbled across a guy that had a cam. They had a cam for it. It was a motorsport Audi motorsport camshaft. And I went ahead and bought it, and I was like, I'm not really ready for it, but I know I'm not going to be able to find it. Here it is. I put it in, and you can't find it anywhere. It's kind of weird.
I'm 10 steps away from a set of cams that I bought for my Fiat from a guy who's a racer, And he says to me, these are the hot cams for that motor. It's, the 2-liter dual overhead cam engine.
Yeah.
And he says, the only thing, he goes, I'll tell you right now, you have to take another cylinder head because these were reground, and you have to have the head modified so the cams will sit right. He goes, but these things, you want to put these on the street, they're really going to wake the car up. And I obviously never used them. They're still sitting under the workbench next door.
10 steps away.
10 steps away.
And you know
Yeah,
what? And
well-
I'm gonna. That's my cue.
Okay.
Terry, thanks for joining us,
10
man.
steps away.
Gentlemen, as always. Isaac, Bryant, Ray. Yeah, you too, Brian. I got Papa Squirrel in the house. Yo, Lewis. Yo, we'll be touching base with each and every one of you guys.
All right, Terry.
Take care.
All right, see you, man.
Later.
Take care, Terry.
But like I said, I'm still waiting for the brake kit. One company makes it, and all it is they just somebody figured out the bracket, the geometry of the bracket, and they CNC'd it, and they use a Willwood Dynalite caliper. So I told the guys, look, I get the calipers. I just need the brackets. No, we sell the whole kit. It's the brackets, the calipers, this, the space. I'm like, dude, I just need the bracket. No, we don't sell just the brackets.
Right.
So
That's an interesting thing. So there was I'm trying to think of the name of the guy's shop. There was an engineer that did brake upgrades, and his entire business was just figuring out the bracket that you needed to run, whatever rotor off of in my case, I have a 1999 Honda Civic EK, had the tiniest little drum brakes on the back, right?
yeah.
And all I really wanted was just the Integra GSR rear discs on the thing. And it's cool because I can go down to any parts store and, obviously Summit Racing, right? When I'm at Summit Racing. But if something blows up at a track or something, I can go to a local parts store and get a replacement rotor off of an Integra, and it's just right there. And he just recently retired from that. And it's just like, oh man,
Wow.
And the other thing about that is nobody's ever put together an index of every brake rotor, every diameter with every offset and every width. I mean, whoever came up with that and released it out to the public to help people fit big brake kits to their car, what an awesome thing that would be.
Absolutely.
Well, luckily for AI, we'll eventually just ask. And it'll tell you more information than you really want to know. So, I mean, we're almost there, I guess. But that's one thing. And Ray can probably, me and Ray are on the same wavelength as this. We love old catalogs and old parts manuals. And I tell you, when I first started out many moons ago, I worked at an auto parts store, and I would just sit there for hours and hours looking at the back, where they had specs and the drawings and the size. With my Mustang, I have a 66 fastback, and when those little radiators are so little. And of course I went to the book, and went through and looked at all the different, and next thing you know, I found out that I can run, one out of, it had the same hose outlet, or where the hoses were in the same spot. It was a bigger radiator on a Ford Fairlane or whatever. But, again, I put it in, I was able to make it work and had the space, had the right, didn't have to, do all the Mickey Mouse hose thing running all over the place, trying to make a hook up. But that's one thing. Again, if nobody wants that time to, it's a lot of time going through a book and laying it down.
That's like when I learned when I couldn't get Pontiac parts in the 80s from a dealership anymore. I mean, wait a minute. I could probably buy Chevelle parts. And the chassis stuff, the clutch parts for the Chevelle worked in the Pontiac. It was an
Where's Terry?
But to Brian's point, when I started an auto parts job when I was in high school, and I remember I was intimidated by that wall of catalogs, and it kept drawing me in, but I was like almost afraid to go near it. And the boss said to me one day, he goes, listen, he goes, you got potential. I need you on the counter, but you got to learn, how to look up parts. I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. He says, yes, you will. And I'll tell you how. It was brilliant. Again, it was like Joe's analog version of a digital problem. He
Look
said,
up the parts for your car.
start with any catalog. I don't care what it is. Shock absorbers. Go to the Monroe catalog. Look up the parts for your car. And he says, and once you know how to find, tune-up stuff and suspension parts and brake parts for your car, you can find it for anybody's car. And he was right. That broke the ice. And we had the ice catalog too for brake parts, as a matter of fact. So that was then I realized, like, wow, this rack is. So now I have my buddy, when he had a Meineke store, the guy with the Model A, he left it, and he says to me, hey, you're still into catalogs. You got catalogs, right? I said, yeah, I got a bunch of them. He gave me a brand new catalog rack with all the all the rails. I have it sitting in the other parts room over there, and one day I want to set that up, put all my catalogs in it.
Nice.
So yeah, like paper. I mean, this is really an episode by itself, right? But paper catalogs, I covet them. I keep them. You can just find the information in there, and like at Summit, we've got a lot of sales folks that are, they've been with the company for a long time, and they have their desks around. They've got, it's like a pipe organ, the size of that thing. That's what their catalog racks look like.
Yeah.
And, going to digital, everybody's transferred and put their catalogs into digital, but now you need 4 screens. You need this here and this open here and this open here and this open here. It's like, no, just give me my catalog, and I go through it.
Flipping through, Brian, I'll tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
Just 2 months ago, I needed a horn relay for my Pontiac. So I go to the local parts store, and it's a good store. They sell hard. It's a hard parts store.
Yeah.
So, and the guy behind the counter, the one guy is, he's not a kid. So I told him I need a horn relay for a 65 Pontiac. It's the same for every GM car. And he pulls it up. He goes, okay, it's got 2 studs and a spade. I'm like, no, it doesn't. I said, it's got 3 spades on the bottom. And he said, oh, wow, well, this one shows. I said, I know, because when I looked it up online, I found a picture that showed 2 studs and a spade. I said, the picture's incorrect.
Right.
So I actually came back home and I brought the relay. I said, here it is.
Yes.
He brought it to the owner who was in the back, the old guy. And he said, oh, yeah. He says, yeah, he knows exactly what it is. He says, it's an HR 142 in standard.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, one relay 142. I said, yeah. I said, do you have one? Pulls it out of stock. There it is. 3 spade terminals on the bottom. I said, I'm going to tell you what happened. My theory is somewhere along the line, somebody was updating a parts catalog and they uploaded the wrong picture.
Exactly.
The picture went the wrong way. I said, now everybody uses everybody's databases. I said, that thing is propagated to the point where you're going to swear that that's the part for my car. And I'm telling you, it's not.
It's corrupted. Corrupted.
And there's nothing he can do about it because they get the database from somebody else. I said, so how many other parts are like that now that people are going to swear are right and they're wrong?
That's like the younger guys. They'll text me or they'll text in our chat, hey, what's this tool number? They'll have an older tool and they can't find it in the catalog. And I have a set of, I got the old catalogs on the truck. So when I send them a picture with the part number, it's from a catalog. And one of the guys said, where did you get that picture from? And I said, it's a catalog. It's not in the computer. I mean, you're not going to find it. And they all give me a hard time because they're like, oh, you can download all that stuff. And you could do. And I was like, dude, I'm so much faster finding it right in the catalog. Right. I know eventually, when they show me a handle or a type of gun, I know the vintage. I know what year to go to or what time period that was for the catalog. And then, of course, I pull it right out and send them a picture. Here's the part number. Yeah. And they're like, man, where can I find those catalogs? And it's like, the dying breed. It's hard to find stuff like that.
Were you able to take a peek at that video I sent you the other day about the IR gun?
Not yet.
Check that out. My buddy Ray sent that to me. He's the guy who did all the rebuilding. And he told me, he said, I used to rebuild those things in like 15 minutes. He still has a ton of I'm telling you, he's got a ton of stuff and he's not doing it anymore. And he wants it to go somewhere. And I'm looking at you.
Are they the old? Was it the old Thunder Gun, the 17 whatever? I got to take a look at it.
The round body IR, yeah.
Yeah.
The
I
big
got my 231C Classic.
Yeah, yep, 231s, and then they had the Matco one was a 17 something, which was a Thunder Gun, but that was the 231 basically.
Yeah.
Speaking of catalogs, excuse me. Speaking of catalogs, I always love when a Summit catalog would come in the mail, and I would
Just got mine yesterday.
I got mine today.
It doesn't matter if I'm looking for a part. It doesn't matter if I'm looking on a page that I have the car for the parts on the page. I just sit there and daydream and just look at it and enjoy it and love.
Wait. I still do the little kid thing. I circle stuff.
Yeah, I do too.
It's the coolest thing. You know, I weirdly, I discovered that I was probably one of the very first people to actually get those catalogs, because I was like, I've been getting those things really since the 90s at least, right? And I know that, and weirdly, because I know the people that actually published that catalog internally for us, they're like, you probably were getting some of the very first catalogs that we ever just sent across the nation to Nebraska from Ohio. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. I had no idea.
I'll tell you, not as much a catalog as a technical help book. This one is one of my favorites.
Nice.
You know, this is a small one. I got the big one over there. This is when I bought these when you're able to buy the Hollander books. Like, yeah,
right.
Send those to me, man.
That's
so
cool.
Brian,
Yeah.
Ray has everything within 10 feet of that chair. If you can name any part and he has it, like a carburetor, he'll grab it, or spark plug, he's got it on the other
You
side.
know, that's maybe that's what wisdom is. He may not know the answer, but he knows the books he needs to have within 10 feet away.
Yep.
Maybe
Brian,
that's what wisdom is.
That helped me land the job that I had for 37 years. It was a technical type job, and they asked me if I could repair this and that piece of equipment and that all. I said, well, no. I said, I don't know everything about every piece. I said, even though I've worked with them. I said, but I'll tell you what. I said, I know how to find the information, and I know where to find the information. I said, so with a little bit of time to do research, I can then affect that repair or give it a good shot. I said, and I will do that. And that was one of the statements that actually got me my job.
Wow.
Because it's true. I mean, I learned from an early age, like, you know, nobody knows everything. I know I don't, and I forgot more than I used to know. But, you know, you look it up. You go back and look it up. And I still take old manuals. And even I mean, it could be something as stupid as an owner's manual for a car, but even the factory service manual, I like reading those first pages and last pages. I look at technical tables, and there's so much information in there that people just never even knew existed in that particular book. It's almost like a waste. It was almost like a waste of print, because I found more people don't and didn't read it than do.
Right.
I mean, the fact you can find hardware tables, you know, hardness tables, tap drill charts in a service manual, like that's what it's supposed to be for, you know, for the guy who's going to do those repairs.
I mean, I think there's data junkies out there like us, right? And there's more than a few of us here in this group. You know, that just, we feel like we're naked, you know, without having that stuff, and we spend all this time trying to compile it. I don't know exactly when the change happened for me, but I think we were getting these pistons from Europe about 6 times a year. They were for Opels. And every time we'd get this piston, we would reverse engineer it, you know, this bore, this height, this dish, these valve reliefs. And you do that same work over and over and over again until we started demanding people tell us, well, what is this out of? And it's a C20 LET. Oh, by golly, we've actually been re-engineering the same piston 6 times a year for about the last 15 years, needlessly re-engineering, because we never kept it in a database anywhere.
Right.
And so that one, it seems like a waste to some people, but if you put 5 minutes worth of effort to put it in a database, that you can find it and look it up later, it could save you 15 or 50 minutes on the back end. Who knows how many times down the road?
The problem, Brian, becomes my database starts becoming stuff like this. It's just pieces of random paper with notes. And that's just what I keep in front of me. I mean, I got 2 more over here. It's like to catalog it. I often thought like I need to make like an encyclopedia almost.
Yeah.
Because, and you got to file it yellow book style because it's,
So,
you know,
Brian, I'm gonna throw this out to Ray real quick. Ray, pull up the last 10 years of Plan and Traffic, the guest list.
it's in this notebook. Last 10 years are all in these pages right here.
That's Plan
Oh
and
my
Traffic.
God.
All in, yeah, this
Brilliant.
is all, there's literally 10 years of Plane and Traffic guests right here. Let me see. Oh no, that's I had some random notes in there. Yeah. 2017 starts here. We're back here. Yeah, this is it. This is the book. I could when you used to send out the interview forms. I still have those in here too. All those the guest interview forms. Yeah, it's here.
It's like, Ray, I got to say this in a good way. You know, you're like a savant.
That's right on, but that's just right on top of the August 70 issue of Superstock magazine.
I'm telling you, Brian, he has everything right there.
Brilliant.
Ray is a data freak, and I like that.
Yeah, I am.
So I have a question for you guys as far as taking notes. Do you ever get to the in a hurry where you jot something down real quick and you scribble, and then it takes you a while looking back over it? It happens to me. That's the reason I ask, because I'll zip
I
something
got to
down,
show you something.
and as I zip it down, it makes sense. And later on, I look at it and I'm like, those lines almost look Arabic. Like they're squig. Like, what was I? Now I'll look around and I'll normally figure it out. But man, it's a pain when you first look back at it and it's not right away.
Yeah.
And
One
you
of
know,
my
you
college
recognize
students-
it could look like your handwriting and you're not so sure it's your handwriting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got
one of
stuff
my
from high
college
school.
teachers told me that an hour after you take your notes, sit down and rewrite them. Because he said 2 or 3 days later, you'll look down at them and go, what the hell did I write?
Yeah.
All right, I got to show you something. And Jim actually asked to see this at a cruise night he met me at, and he took a picture of it. I realized about a year ago, as I'm going through my day, you talk to people. Oh yeah, I'll get you that number. And you talk to somebody else. Yeah, you know what? I'll send you his contact. I get home and say, wow, what do I got to do? Who did I have to? So I realized the memory is, there's too much going on. So I now carry this. And all it is just a little notebook filled with, notes. There's
Nice.
diagrams in here, just all sorts of handwritten stuff. Brian's got one. And
I
I
just brought
whip
two
it out of my
notes
pocket
today.
and show people, and they say, wow, that's pretty brilliant. I said, I can't rely on this anymore. So,
See, there you go, Ray. 231.
yeah, there you go.
Beauty.
Right? That thing's
I got a 55-gallon barrel full of these.
oh,
What
geez.
what brand is that?
It's an Ingersoll
Yeah,
I got one too, just like that.
231 classic. It's old school gun right there.
yeah.
Fix. I used to fix. Like I said, I got tons of parts. Fix them all day long, dude. All day long.
That's cool. I grabbed mine out of the drawer. I don't know. I've gone to battery here quite a bit in like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I just bought a really cool DeWalt, actually, that is a mid-sized gun that has 860 odd foot-pounds of torque, and it's like, whoa, it's awesome. What these guys, we were talking about this. Whoever this guy is at DeWalt, the mad genius over there that's putting together different combinations of brushless motors and anvils and all this business. It's like there is a nutcase over there that is just doing the craziest Frankenstein stuff. It's like this chase. I mean, I'd love to learn more about this, from use sometime. But these guns that will just break your wrist from 1,500 foot-pounds, because they over anvil something, as an example.
Yeah, the only problem, unfortunately, the battery stuff is great. It's not going anywhere. It just doesn't last as long as the old school stuff.
Right.
And I got guys constantly, brings me the stuff, and they say this doesn't have the oomph. And I said, dude, it's not going to last like the air tool. It's been sitting in, that your dad used, and it's 30 years old.
Brian,
Right.
we've talked about this, and I think part of that problem is the way it's used. And again, we've discussed this a lot. I know, I don't use I use a battery gun, but I don't use it to break stuff loose. I'll loosen my lug nuts with a breaker bar and then use the gun to run them off. I think saving that stress on the gun is going to make it last a lot longer.
Yeah.
And the same thing, run them down, seat them again, and then torque them by hand. That's just how I like to do it. So I think a lot of guys, let's face it, a lot of guys in the shops are troglodytes. They're they're definitely cavemen. And I say that lovingly because a lot of them are my close friends.
Troglodytes.
And
I haven't heard that word in a year.
well, my friend Joe used to say, "Yeah, I'm going down to the shop. I'm gonna talk to the Trogs." And I thought, what, that band from the '60s? He says, "No, the Troglodytes." Like, oh yeah, okay, the cavemen. And Brian, you see it every day.
Oh, I see it every day. It's
even just with hand tools, the way people abuse their tools. And I got stuff out here for 45 years that's like brand new. I mean, you can see the wear on it, but the tool works like it did 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Because
our new gun, Ray's got one of our new guns, air gun, and the new one, 1,700 foot-pounds of torque breakaway, and they were actually destroying the anvils. So to the point where that we had to change, and they shot peen the anvils for strength and different metals, and now it's just beating the crap out of the sockets.
right.
That's there's a point about and of course they'd say, hey, how come I had a socket that lasted X amount of years and now this is half the time? And I'm like, well, the gun that you used to have, at the time, this was the Almighty, and this is only 600 foot-pounds.
Yeah.
And now we're at 17.
Double plus.
That's a lot of power.
Yeah.
Going through, and the material for the socket really hasn't changed. Actually, they've gotten skinnier because they got tighter clearances. The smaller, they need guy in smaller places, so they're not even as thick as the old ones used to be.
Not even that, but if you look at the interface between the anvil and the opening in the socket, there's a little bit of play there, and that's what that anvil is beating on, and that's why you see the sockets all misformed, because of that.
But it's crazy, and like I said, our new battery stuff is just like that. And I tell guys, if you're going to use it every day, you got to realize, they make it right to the warranty time. So
Right.
that's why some of those guys have a great deal. We sell Milwaukee. Milwaukee has a great deal because it's 5 years on some. Of course, they break the stuff down. It's not everything's 5 years.
Brian, that's what I wanted to ask you. I forgot all about it. I kind of let it lapse. But that Milwaukee ratchet that I have that needed that piece in the head that we could never find.
Right.
I was thinking, can I just send that to them and ask them to repair it for me? Will they do the repair and just charge me?
Yeah. Because you need the little ball piece down the bottom.
It was a small piece up in head. So I just go online and find Milwaukee and follow
a service area.
All right. Yeah. That way I put another. I'll have one here, and I've been carrying a bag with me where I take a couple of the small battery tools with me back and forth to the shop every day because I may need them at home. But this way I could leave one there and keep one here.
So
right.
I had a question. I want to buy a Impact cordless for the bus. You know, from when I'm out traveling. You think the DeWalt cordless are good?
So they've got some really, I'm not the expert, except for I did just do some research on this thing. So Milwaukee had some really killer stuff in a mid-sized gun. It was kind of a stubby, right? And it was pretty much the king up until about like a year and a half ago. And then DeWalt came, and there's this battle every year between those two guys and, trying to, come up with the next better level gun. And I found this really odd, and you guys probably know what it is, but it's a YouTube channel called the Torque Test Channel.
Oh yeah.
Just phenomenal information, and they've got a guide there of every gun that they've ever tested. And they're like, here's 5 seconds. It's as standardized as we can make it. They see through the batteries, right? That's one of the things that the gun may have this amount of torque with this battery.
Mm-hmm.
Optional battery, but if you get the 2 amp hour battery, well, it's not that, right? But it's got a lot of great data in there, and I wish I knew the full history of like where these guns were made by who. In a lot of cases, it's just a different color on the outside, and it's the same guts inside. But pretty amazing. Right on.
Yeah, me personally, I mean, the Milwaukee stuff, has a better warranty. Has a really good warranty. I mean, like I said, they are the king. I mean, they own. They've got the realm of all that stuff, and power wise, I can't really argue that way. When we've gone through several different companies before, and it was always supply and demand was always an issue with it, and the only people that so far have been able to keep up with us is Milwaukee, and I can't talk too bad, and their turnaround time is a lot better. And like on what Ray was saying, it's hard to find. They don't really sell parts out because they want the stuff to come back to them. It's lightening up. I mean, finally, I'm starting to get head kits. I'm starting to get some smaller stuff, but parts wise, it's kind of hard to get at the moment because they have a repair. It's
What I
like
saw?
a guy that's selling. When somebody comes to me and want to buy a front end machine, we sell one, but there's a company that has sales reps, so they don't. We just kind of pass the buck along to the next guy with that because they don't want to step out of another middleman.
What I saw on one of the tool test channels? It's a little while ago, but it was for the Milwaukee ratchets because you have to like get your fingers in there to turn the direction, and they came out with like a button you could put on top of it that would give you an outside way of turning the direction from tighten to loosen, which I thought looked like a great idea. It was just a quick little add-on.
Yeah,
They
have another one that just came out with a bigger head. I guess it's for us older guys that have joint issues.
Yeah.
And at first I thought, well, that's too big, but then when I saw one, I was like, that's actually kind of nice about trying to turn the knob left or right. Or as on some of the brands on and off, and people think they got to turn their ratchets off. So
I showed a guy. I showed one of the young guys once. I said, at the end of the day, I said, "Don't forget, turn your ratchet off." Because what do you mean? I said, "Well, look at the head, just a regular ratchet." I said, "He says on and off. You got to shut that off at the end of the day." And he was like, "Oh wow, really? Oh, I haven't been doing that." I'm like, "Yeah, you better start."
Better start. Yeah. It's
Ray,
like you might as well sell a muffler bearing.
You guys are taking me back to, again, I was a consumer, of tools, consumer grade. I was never a professional mechanic. And so going into a Sears store and then going into the Craftsman section and just being like, it was before everything got, shipped over to China, right?
When I was
And
I'm sorry, go on. Finish.
in the candy store.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, we had a big Sears store a couple towns away. We'd ride our bikes down there, and they always had that giant Master Mechanic tool set all laid out. I said, someday I'm gonna have that, man. Oh my God, that was great. Yeah, that was really like for off the street people to have access to tools like that. Sears really nailed it. I mean, that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Getting a nail puller to to an impact gun or
Oh God, when I got my first Sears toolbox back in 1973, after I went in the service, I thought I was reaching nirvana because
Yeah.
I had tools that I could use.
Right.
Mhm.
And I had tools that I wouldn't loan to anybody. If you're going to use it, you're going to use it in front of me and then hand it back to me, because
Right.
I don't want to come looking for you with a ball peen hammer.
Right.
And now everything old is new again, because if you have the original Craftsman stuff, that's worth
Yes.
some money now because it was the made in USA stuff. People want that. They're
Yes.
buying it. There's users groups out on Facebook that my buddy's into that. He's buying and trading a lot of the older stuff to have kind of, some of it is just like, garage art. And other is like, yeah, I want that metal, the metal buffer because it just has that feel to it. I don't want the plastic one.
Mhm.
And,
It's funny that you said that because it's actually a Craftsman. It was a belt sander, and it was my dad's father, my grandfather's. And I remember it looked like, and this is like 1952 or something, this belt sander, and I remember it was funny. It was in a box, and I went to open it, and I'd asked my dad. I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, that was Dad's belt sander. Don't touch it. You can't touch it." And I opened it up, and it looked like a 58 Imperial. It was
Right.
big, and it had chrome, and it had all the stuff, and it was like, God, I mean, this is like awesome. And I'm like, I wanted to use it. He goes, "No, you can't use it. You can't use
Cut
it."
your arm off.
I was like, "Dad, man, I mean, look at this thing," and it was heavy, and I mean, like I said, it was just awesome. And so that sat up on the shelf in my dad's garage for years and years and years. And when my dad passed, and we were cleaning up stuff, I grabbed that belt sander.
Careful, cat.
And I grabbed that belt sander, I plugged it in, and I squeezed that trigger, and it shocked the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I tell you one thing, man. And now I was like, I only wish my dad was there.
Yeah.
Because that's why he was telling me not to mess with it. He just had it because it was his dad's.
He'd be laughing his ass off.
And I tell you, man, that zapped the crap out of me. And I was in the next week, man. I tell you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what happens. We have a metal body.
And I unplugged it. I wrapped it back up. I put it back in the box. It's sitting on the shelf over at Mom's house now. And I said one day it will come here, but I'm going to tell you, that was a hell of a zap. So
Yeah.
I was
we all know
Dad, I
that
don't know why Dad
smell.
won't let me use this thing,
We know that smell of a tool that has not been turned on in 30 years.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that electrical of brushes that have not touched anything
Yeah.
rotated in 30 years.
That's right.
Electrolux vacuums. I'll just throw another one out there, vacuum cleaners and things. And one of the things at Wiseco, this was prior to CNC punch and die manufacturing, but we had a tool room of actual machinists and tool and die guys where, every time they did a punch, right, for a piston forging, all the radii and everything like that, it was hand blended and it was perfect. And, the castings would have been the same way on a lot of those tools by a guy. And that would last, that piston, punch tool might last 8,000 hits or whatever it is. And then you finally broke your punch or your die, and you had to go ahead and whittle another one out from a print. But the radii was never quite the same as what it was from, that guy that did it 5 years ago to maybe a new guy, or maybe the same guy doing it 6 years, but they just had this feel for what radii was supposed to look and feel like. And that's why you would get gram differences of 6 or 7 grams off the same part number, off the same forging.
Yeah.
Was just because of that old school tool and die making.
Yeah.
So the vacuum, the Electrolux vacuum,
Mm.
you just started with that. Was there more to the Electrolux story?
Run with it. I'm thinking of my grandma's.
Hang on.
Oh God, here we go again.
I told you.
Do you remember the brand called Kirby?
Yes.
This thing is chrome. You wouldn't know it's filled with dust, but this is a chrome vacuum that my dad actually was selling these back as in between jobs. That thing weighs a ton. It came with a whole box of attachments. It had a grinder attachment. I think it had a meat grinder too. I mean, there was all sorts of hoses and all sorts of stuff. That thing is a Cadillac. And my wife keeps saying, "Why don't you get rid of that? We don't even use it." I said, "We're never getting rid of that." I said,
My
"You
dad
put it in the
had
box with me."
Do you remember the mechanical feel? Like, you know what I'm talking about, the handle at the angle, the way that you would rotate that thing to get that thing to steer left or right. I swear to God, it's like riding a bike.
That does have a joint to it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
My
Yes.
my dad had a Kirby like that. I don't know if it's still around. I doubt it, but I wished it was still around. I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, too, my dad I inherited a skill saw. It's a worm drive skill saw. I don't know what brand. I'd have to go dig it out somewhere, but full metal body, everything. And I remember as a kid, my dad, well, gosh, even as a young adult, my dad would be using that, cutting 2x4s. And I mean, he'd sling that thing around. And when I had to redo the fence, I messaged my brother and I'm like, "Hey, you got my skill saw? I need that back." And I've got like a Craftsman, a newer one. It's, it's metal, but it's plastic, and it's, and he says, "Oh, let me look for it. You don't have one?" And I'm like, "I have one. I don't want to use it because that thing I've used now." Since my dad passed and I inherited it, I've used it. I've taken it out and I'm like, "God, I miss my dad." And but man, I got to fling that thing up on something, get it steady, and then run it.
Yeah.
And it just amazed me because my dad he'd whip that thing around and he'd be cutting and moving. And like I said, now with that being said, I did get my skill saw back and I zipped through everything with that light work. Yeah. But yeah, that stuff built back then, man, that it was a thing of beauty.
And speaking of the smell of tools, the sound of your dad's saw.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I can still hear that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It had that after ring when you let go of it, you still had that.
Yep.
You didn't have that clutch brake like the battery stuff does now.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you
very
remember when they were starting to come out with plastic bodies and all the ads were saying, "Don't get shocked by your metal body tool.
Brian.
Buy this plastic body and even if it shorts out, you won't get shocked."
Double insulated. Yeah.
Yes. And I remember those because I got zapped real good with one of my uncle's Sanders, I think.
Yeah.
He got mad at me for the words I used.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good old days.
Yeah, very true.
I like my plastic tools where I don't have to worry about being shocked.
So my grandpa passed away here about, I guess it was maybe 10 years ago. And, we were all going through and we were talking about his belongings, right? The things that were kind of special. And at the very, very top of my list was his air compressor. And it made this interesting pocket sound that I can still remember it starting up and running. And I've still got this thing and I need to repair it. I've also got a 120 volt lawnmower that he just run this thing around the yard and he ran over the cord so many times and he just patched it up,
Yep.
electrical tape it, and I've got that thing sitting out and back in my yard here. And I'm like, I need to convert that to brushless. I need to put a motor controller on it and have this really classic, 1940s something or other lawnmower, an EV lawnmower from back before EVs existed, right?
Yep.
Put it in a museum. It's safer for you.
The cool ones were when I was a kid, we would always get into people's garages and everybody had, I don't know the name of it, but the lawnmower that had the big
The blades, the twist.
right. There's
Yeah.
a name
Yep.
for that type of lawnmower because we
Yeah.
wanted the side shaft engine to make mini bikes and go-karts out of, and every one of them smelled like varnish. I mean, and I'm talking about in the 60s, they already smelled like varnish. So, and that's when gas was good. So how long was that sitting? But everybody had those things. And what a beast, man. What a beast they were. They were. Ugh.
So when I was a kid, we had one of those, but without the motor. And I would
Yes.
ask my dad, "Well, where's the motor?" And he's
Uh-huh.
like, "You're the motor."
You're
And I'm
the
like,
motor.
"No.
Oh,
Where's
you
the
just
motor?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "You're the motor."
Right.
Yep.
And I would have to push that thing around, and I hated it. Hated it.
Yep.
I get
Well,
my
Isaac-
own.
It cut
I get-
good though.
Yeah.
I know. I get my own house. And believe it or not, we can grow grass in the desert, but not as much as back east, or Midwest. But I'm like, I'll never get one of those things. And when I get my own house and I decide I'm going to try to grow grass, I go and I look around and I'm like, and I kept coming back to that push mower. I found one at like Home Depot or something like that, and I'm like, and I bought it.
Yeah.
So as much as I sat there and hated that thing, it
You
brought back
remember the
memories.
sound, right? You remember
Yes.
the sound
Yeah.
of the blade swishing?
Yep.
The
And you remember-
sound, the feel.
Yes, in wet grass, and having to take a run at that wet grass and
Yes.
only making it in there like a couple feet and having to pull it back out.
Right, right.
Yes.
Well,
Awesome.
if you ever find one of the older ones that had a motor, but it doesn't have a motor, I have 3 of them in my shed, motors in my shed.
10 feet
And
away.
as part of my moving plans, I got to get rid of them. So if you want a nice Briggs side shaft engine, I got 3 of them.
Awesome.
They're all for grabs.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
All right. Hey guys, I gotta jump ship. I
I
can't
gotta
hang,
get going.
can't hang with you guys.
It's just been awesome.
We'll
Fellas,
see you later there, Lee.
All right.
Wonderful meeting you guys too. I'll see you guys later.
Brian, it's
That's
always
awesome.
a pleasure.
Hey Brian, you're always welcome, man. Anything you want to talk about, just come hang out with us.
It's been a wonderful event and yeah, thank you.
You know, I want to mention in this now. I got to check the new summer catalog. In the last catalog, I saw. I'm looking to put seats in my car, and I saw that Summit now has. I guess that I don't know if they're Sparkos, but they're the aftermarket muscle car seats, but they're trimmed out in the pattern that would be correct for the car.
Okay.
So that, which is phenomenal, and I'm going to call and order a set. I got to get a set of
Well,
them.
yeah, just to ask through Lewis. So I know the guy that actually brought that lineup in, and yeah, we can. And it's a little bit hard to sort through 1,000 different seats on our website sometimes.
Yeah.
But just let Lewis know, and he'll get a hold of me, and you and I can talk, and we'll zero in on exactly what you need.
Did you say Drew Lewis is his name?
No,
Lewis, and just get with Lewis, and he'll give you my email or whatever.
Oh,
And-
this Lewis. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Lewis, please send me Brian's info, contact info. Sure.
Same thing with any of you guys. If there's anything I can do to help you guys in the future, just let me know. I'm happy to help.
Yeah. I'll reach out to you right away because
Awesome.
I
Don't worry.
want to get those. I got the money put aside and I want those seats.
Game on, guys.
Very cool. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks,
Right.
Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
See you. Bye.
All right.
Take care.
Excellent. Yeah, that's on my short list. All right, so I guess we can. We've used enough bandwidth on the site here. We can go off air. So Lewis started the show. I'll end it for Lewis Lee and Brian Nutter from Summit. I'm glad he came on tonight. It was a great guest as always. Ray Guarino, Motormouth Radio, of course, Matt Man, Brian, Coach Isaac, and Papa Squirrel. Good to see him back again. It's the return of Papa Squirrel, which is good. And we'll be back next week with probably something pretty interesting. So tune in next Thursday at 9.
You
All right.
always do.
All righty. Good. Okay.